Is $70 for video games driving the sales of games down? In other words, are people buying less copies of games? Are we seeing less quantity of game sales because of that $10 price increase that began basically this generation with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X? Now, Microsoft was a little bit slower to adopt the $70 price point in 2023. That was kind of the first year that they did it. Not the best year to do it, since the first game they introduced it with was Redfall, but that does, I think, lend their Game Pass service a little bit more credibility. People are like, oh, well, I'll just bump up to Game Pass instead of buying games at $70. But Sony introduced the $70 price point quite a bit earlier in the life cycle of their console in 2020 when the console debuted with games like Demon's Souls, Returnal, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Well, we've got an article here from The Gamer looking at some data that is suggesting that less people or less total sales of games is resulting potentially from that $70. Now, I am going to look at total quantity of sales all the way back to, I think I've got a chart here, back to 2018. Just looking at what sort of happened. We do need to be careful comparing any sales numbers to 2020 and 2021 because of sort of the sickie, everybody staying at home. There was a huge surge of tech sales, software sales, consumption of digital media, had like sort of record-breaking years in those years. So when you compare to those years, you need to be careful that you don't draw like causalities where it could just be the correlation of a slowdown back to sort of normal levels. So we're going to take a look at this. We're also going to contrast just very good visual of what's it look like when you sell a chunk of something at 60 and a chunk of something at 70. Even if you sell less copies, you tend to make more money. So let's take a look at this article from The Gamer. It says, PlayStation data suggests $70 games are resulting in fewer sales. This can only mean one thing. Well, it could mean a lot of different things. We don't actually know yet. The Xbox Series XS and PlayStation 5 heralded the new generation, and while it can still sometimes feel like a relatively new era, the fact is it's been almost 3 years already, while we're still getting used to some new standards. Such new standards include the pricing of this gen's games, which have increased. Nowadays, many new games, especially AAA ones, launch at a price of $70, minus a cent or penny respectively. But according to some data, the $69.99 price point could be negatively impacting game unit sales. The data comes from Sony and therefore applies to the PS5's game unit sales more specifically, but it's revealing how the shift in price could be affecting consumer behavior this gen. Well, keep in mind too, the adoption rate of PS5 is speeding up now, and that could be driving quantity down as well, because when you switch to the PS5, you're going to buy maybe 1 or 2 games. When you're on the PS4, maybe you're just buying more because it's sort of the end of the life cycle. There's no real reason to slow down. But when you get into a new system, you just spent a larger amount of money, and that might make you budget a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, I just bought this system and a controller, and now I'm going to spend, less. I'm just speculating. We can't draw direct correlation here. Causation from just correlating factors, because there are still so many people on the PS4. In a deep dive, Tweaktown observed that while Sony is generating record-breaking revenues from PS4 and PS5 console sales, and that software revenues were equally at an all-time high, actual game unit sales had dropped substantially. I've already read ahead. I don't know if substantially is the right word, but we'll take a look here. Pulling data provided by Sony, the graphs show that PlayStation users spent $6.3 billion in combined digital and physical software purchases for fiscal year 2022. However, overall game unit sales dropped to 264 million games for fiscal year 22, representing a 39 million drop in unit sales from a year ago. Again, as I said at the beginning, you can't compare that drop off to 2021 and start drawing conclusions. Everyone's share value, stock market value, everything went way up in 2020 and 2021. It kind of continued for a lot, and then it fell back down in 2022. This is across all tech sectors. This is across even outside of tech sectors, because people were doing a lot of spending in those years. Everybody was stuck at home, so video games and streaming services and digital media saw record-breaking highs. So when you see a drop in 2022, it's not necessarily indicative of a causality or a problem. It's just sort of a market trend we're seeing everywhere. However, Sony has not only managed to maintain revenue from software sales, but is making record amounts. So what does this suggest? So here's Derek Strickland. This is the guy they pulled it from over there at Tweaktown. As Tweaktown noted, it suggests that PlayStation gamers are buying fewer games, but spending more money on the games that they do buy, and that this is emblematic of the higher $70 price tag for new PlayStation 5 titles. Another data point seemed to back this up, with Sony management confirming in a results briefing that third-party game sales had fallen in fiscal year 22, with the PlayStation Store showing 38.6 million year-over-year reduction in sales of third-party titles from the last fiscal year. See, and something to point out here, a lot of those third-party titles are not being sold at $70. The $70 price point is not a standard. You find it most commonly on first-party titles on the PlayStation 5. It's not as common outside of those. So the fact that they point to third-party game sales slowing down in 2022, again, that's more symptomatic of what the market is doing right now in the wake of 2020 and 2021 being so insanely massive. So even third-party numbers were down, and that's not surprising. That's basically been the case for everybody. None of this is alarming, by the way. And again, I don't think we can say it's in relation to the $70 price point. Let me just show you why. So here on this chart, you can see full software total sales. This is for Sony PlayStation worldwide. And then we have first-party titles as the darker bar. And 2019, you can see here, there's this jump in 2020. Now, this is the year the PlayStation 5 drops. This is the year they introduce games at $70. And if they're correct in what they're saying in this article, then you wouldn't have seen this. You would have seen, a reduction. Again, you have to consider what was happening in these years. Look at 2021. Again, strong. The 303 is still higher than the 276. Now, we did see a dip in first party in 2021, which is actually not surprising, given that a lot of games got bumped from this year into 2022. So it's not surprising that first party saw a bit of a dip. This was around the time we saw record-breaking months almost every month for like Miles Morales and Spider-Man. So if $70 was actually driving people to buy less total quantity of games, I think you would have seen it in these years. But again, as you come down from this surge, these 2 years higher than the previous two, as you come down, this is something that's being felt by almost every tech sector. This is not necessarily a direct causality from the $70 price point. Now, we're going to continue reading because I do want to point out a couple of things here in a moment with just some basic math of, we got some ad shuffling here on the article, moving things around. So you got to remember that those third-party sales going down, it's not surprising at all, given what the market's doing. A further boost to the suggestion is via Activision Modern Warfare 2, which generated $1 billion in sales in 10 days without managing to significantly shift total unit sales that much during its launch period on PlayStation. Modern Warfare 2 was offered only at the $70 price point. All this suggests that while the higher price for the PS5 games is having a negative impact on overall game sales, it isn't a depressing effect on game revenues. Again, see, they started this article by saying it could, and then they're saying, while the higher price point for new PS5 games is having a negative impact on overall game sales. They've not proven that. There's not been a compelling case made. So speaking as if that's been concluded is not the greatest way to write your article. Up above, they were saying it could be, and that's fine. I think it's fine to speculate that. But speaking as if it's been concluded, I don't think is fair, and I'll show you more in just a second. It seems the gamble on higher prices for this gen appears to be paying off, as Sony probably doesn't much mind that game unit sales are down while raking in more money. While gamers might be worse off out of pocket, here's hoping that those $70 games can come down in price as the generation wears on. The other thing to consider is that, again, if we look at these charts, every year that they get better and better at distributing the PS5, you're going to see these numbers either stay roughly the same or not have big jumps, because what's going on, and I've speculated that this is one of the reasons why 2023 is a lighter first-party year for Sony, because they don't want to give people sort of choice paralysis. Oh, I finally got a PS5, let me go check out what games I should get, and there's too many. it's like they almost are going to be drowning, right? Because right now you have Demon Souls, Returnal, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and then you have Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok. Now, Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok may have already been purchased by a lot of those people, so when they come over to the PS5, they might not be immediately buying new titles, they may be just upgrading. However, in past years, in 2021 and 2022 respectively, they saw big boosts in the sales of their first-party games every time they restocked the market. So whenever they're doing that, you're going to see people snagging those games right away. But given that there aren't that many PS5-only titles, there aren't that many titles that you're going to want to buy almost immediately once you get your PS5, the quantity of sales is not going to be sort of uncapped. If you're buying games still to this day on your PS4, there's no reason to wait, there's no reason to stop, especially because you're not seeing the price hike yet, but you're also not really limited. The library's massive. Every time something comes out, whether it's a cross-generational game like Ragnarok or just a new third-party title, you can buy it on your PS4. There's no reason to wait. But when you get your PS5, you're going to be a little bit more picky, I would think, because it's like, hey, now that I've got this new piece of equipment, I want to see what this PS5-only title looks like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, or maybe you want to check out the director's cut of Ghost of Tsushima. Well, if you already own Ghost of Tsushima, that's not going to register as a quantity sale. You're just spending like a $10 upgrade to get the director's cut. So there's a lot of moving parts here as to why you're not, I don't think, going to see these huge bumps in first-party sales numbers until they actually get the market fully saturated with the PS5 and then start dropping titles like Spider-Man 2. I think this will be the year to sort of show just how quick of an impact you can have with the first-party title. But this year's going to be a challenge as well to move that dark bar, that first-party bar. There was a DLC for Burning Shores, and then there's Spider-Man 2. It's a slightly thinner year for PlayStation 5, but Final Fantasy 16 will likely help maintain, overall sales because that's a third-party game, but it's a slightly thinner year. And I think some of this is because they were anticipating having to compete with Activision Blizzard. Maybe they were worried, maybe they want to kind of push some things off, but I also think they're saving certain things, or maybe not saving, but sort of shuffling them back so that once the market is more saturated with PS5s, then they can hit a really good cadence of first-party titles, third-party titles hitting at that rhythm, and no one's experiencing choice paralysis. Because if you're a late adopter, right, if they're going to be dropping the unified SKU of the PlayStation 5 with the external drive, and that's going to mean everybody can buy the thing for the discounted cost, right? The one without the disc drive costs less money. So for many people, the optics on that might be like, oh, they dropped the price. Not really, but it's going to feel that way because there's no longer the disc drive version in the market. Well, when you finally get your hands on that after waiting all this time, you're going to have a nice swath of games to choose from, and then going forward, every time a game gets added like Spider-Man 2 or Wolverine, it'll feel more additive and you'll be more likely to buy it. That's another thing that could be hurting quantity of sales. Is you have these big boosts in PlayStation 5 saturation of hardware, and a lot of those people are only going to buy one or two games around that time. They're not going to go out and do big spending. As we already stated, it can kind of cause you to pinch your pennies a little bit because you're like, hey, I just made this really big purchase. I only need to buy one or two games and I'll be pretty satisfied. And again, there's a limited number of PS5 only titles as it is. These big boosts right here in 2020 and 2021 could be cannibalizing quantity a little bit in 2022 because a lot of those games carry over and they're playable on your PS5. Now, something else I wanted to show you is I want to compare this 49 right here, first party titles 49, and then this 43 here. And this is not a hard science. Just for the visual, I wanted to show you something. Let's imagine that all 49 of these in millions, all 49 million of these were sold at $60. But just for the sake of making it really clean, let's just say you sold 49 items at $60. This is how much money you would make, right? Let's just say you had, 49 albums that you were selling to people and you were charging $60. You would make just under $3,000. Now, if you are doing that, 49 at 60, what does 43 at 70 look like? What's that look like? So again, here's your 49 at 60. 43 at 70 is actually more. Not a ton more. I mean, it's just a teeny bit more, but it's more. So when you take this into the millions, it's pretty alarming that they could drop by 6 million in sales, 43 down from 49. And if these are all at 70 and these are all at 60, again, this is not a hard science. I'm just saying, just for the sake of the visual, back in 2019, there were no $70 games, okay? So going forward, they can see a reduction in quantity and actually make more money. And this lines up with what we saw in the report. So I don't know if there's enough hard evidence to say $70 is driving people to buy less games, again, because in 2020, that idea was ushered in and it didn't seem to really hurt. But you also have to remember that in 2020, there weren't that many PS5s in circulation, so a lot of people were buying an insane number of games, likely at old prices or sales that were going on. Same with 2021. Anybody who's looking at a downturn in 2022 from those previous years needs to take into consideration what was happening in the market at that time and not draw such jumps in logic to say, oh yeah, definitely $70 is driving down quantity of sales. I've not been compelled that that's the case. We're going to have to look at more data over the years. We're also going to have to look at data when there's more games coming out. You know, if in 2024 there's more consistent first party or even third party games coming out at $70 and the sales numbers start to pick up, it'll definitely prove this article and this theory wrong. So we'll have to wait and see. Only time will tell. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is it causing you to buy less games? Certainly isn't slowing me down, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down the profits for Sony either. As always, hit subscribe, hit the bell button, and I'll see you in the next video.